Welcome to the church family that is lifting lives through living love, inspiring hope, filling with faith, and transforming our world. These recorded messages are made available so that you might have additional opportunities to stay connected with us and that you might learn and grow in your faith. God bless you as you hear the word today. And now, the message.
Good morning. Our scripture reading this morning is from John 12, verses 1 through 8. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about a pint of nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with fragrance of the perfume. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. "Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages." He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. "Leave her alone," Jesus replied. "It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me." May the Lord bless the reading and hearing of his word.
If you've been around our church long enough, you've probably heard me mention Adam Grant's book, Give and Take. I think the last time I used it in a sermon was back in 2020. If you're not familiar with Give and Take, Adam's suggestion is that when it comes to transactions in relationships, all of us have three different orientations. There are some among us who are givers. Givers approach relationships, and the first question they ask is, what can I give to the other person? You know, they give without any expectation of return. Takers take the opposite tack, that in any relationship they engage in, they're kind of evaluating, what can I get out of this relationship? It doesn't mean that they're mean or bad people. Oftentimes it just means they're super competitive and goal-oriented. Those are takers. And then you have matchers, whose operating principle in relationships is an equal balance of giving and taking. Everything is even Steven. Their spirit animal is a balance scale, which I know is not an animal, but you get my point. You know, everything in perfect balance. I know in my heart of hearts that I'm more of a matcher than anything else. I know this because when I go to like Japanese steakhouses, you guys go to Japanese steakhouse, you know what I'm talking about? They put more food on your plate than you can possibly eat, right? But I can't help it. When that chef makes that big mound of rice and begins divvying it out person to person, I'm watching. I'm making sure it's all even. And every time there's some little bit left, and I notice who gets the extra rice. And if it's not me, I'm disappointed and upset, right? Like there's this part of me matcher, right? You know, so I don't know. If you want to know what you are, you can simply go online. You can Google Give and Take quiz, and a little assessment pops up with questions that you can kind of figure out which am I. The questions look like this. It's a sample one. Sample question. You and a stranger both receive some money, but you get to choose how much you each receive. And here's the kicker. You'll never do you choose. There's the matcher option. I get $5 and the stranger gets $5. There's the taker option. I get $8 and the stranger gets $4. And then there's the giver option. I get $5 and the stranger gets $7. Now, based on his research, all the people who have taken these tests and so forth, here's the good news. Adam Grant reports that only about 15% of the population chooses option B. So even though we'll never meet or see the stranger, only about 15% of the people give themselves more money. So maybe we aren't quite as selfish as we sometimes think. The bad news is that an equal amount, only 15%, choose option C, to give more to the stranger. The great majority of us, 70% of us, choose option A. I get 5, they get 5, it's even Steve. Now here is the kicker, the little twist to the quiz. If you notice in option A and option C, you get the same amount, $5. In other words, it doesn't cost you a thing in this question to be generous and give $2 more to the other person. And yet, most of us choose option A. It's just how we are wired. So if you're among those in option A and feeling chagrined right now, don't worry, you're in good company with the great majority of us, okay? So let's take these dynamics, this idea of giver, taker, matcher, into today's Bible story. Let's start with the disciples. Because Matthew and Mark's version of this same story tell us that it wasn't just Judas who was mumbling and grumbling and complaining about the cost of this perfume and how it could have been used. It was all the disciples were thinking it and talking about it. That when they see this amazing act of love and devotion, a woman cracking open expensive perfume, wiping Jesus' feet with her hair, their first response is not amazement and wonder. Their first response is critique. They're all grumbling. This ointment could have been sold for 300 denarii, and that amount could have been given to the poor. It could have done so much more. To me, this is the response of a matcher. What do? When they see the gift, they measure it. They assign it a number, 300 denarii. Then they compare. Well, here's what we could have done, and we could have done so much more. And ultimately, they critique and criticize. They do their comment is not motivated by a true spirit, a heart of generosity. They're not really concerned for the poor. They're concerned for their own kind of self-image and self-understanding. It's what author John Acuff calls a Jesus juke. You never heard of Jesus juke? It's where you use like some kind of religious sounding thing to make yourself feel big and to make someone else feel small and shamed. That's what they're doing. They take this amazing, wonderful, beautiful gift and they measure it, they compare it, and they bring it down to size because they're matchers. Now, at least they're not takers though. Because in John's gospel, he's clear, among this group of matchers, there is one guy who was especially a taker, Judas Iscariot, because he was in charge of the common purse. And so he knows if 300 denarii had gone into the common purse, he could take a little bit of that and line his own pocket. So when he sees this amazing, beautiful gift being poured out for Jesus, his first response is not, what could I have done with it? But it's jealousy of what could I do with it for myself. He's a through and through taker. And in direct contrast to that, we have the woman who shines through all of the Gospels as a pure giver. Now, in John's Gospel, the woman is identified as Mary, the brother of Lazarus. And so when she does this act for Jesus, it's seen as an act of gratitude and thanksgiving for Jesus, just the chapter before, having brought her brother back from the dead. In Matthew and Mark's gospel, she's not identified at all. And it's not at Lazarus' house, it's in another person's house, Simon the leper. And so we don't even know who this woman was at all. It makes it even more wonderful and strange that a complete stranger would approach Jesus and perform this act of kindness for him. And I said earlier how much the perfume was worth, 300 denarii. To a lot of us, that's just a number. It doesn't mean anything to us, but a denarius was equal to 1 day's wages. So 300 denarii was equal to almost a full year's worth of income. Think about how expensive and valuable that perfume would have been. And if I had perfume that expensive, I told you I'm a matcher. What I'd be doing is I'd be dabbing it on Jesus' feet. Like I remember like my first thing of cologne when I was a kid was a little Ralph Lauren polo, and I was taught, like you just dab it and just do a little bit like that. Like she didn't dab it on Jesus' feet. She didn't pour out just a little bit. She didn't measure it. She didn't pour out halfway. She broke open the jar and poured it all out on Jesus' feet. An extravagant, no holds barred, no restraint moment of giving and generosity. And Jesus says it's beautiful. Well, let's take for a moment Jesus. Who is he in this story? I mean, if the disciples are right, and this gift could have been used to benefit countless other people in poverty, does that make Jesus a taker for allowing her to do this for him? And my answer, my view is no, because there's a huge difference between taking and receiving. Receiving is part and parcel of giving. Like, you have to be able to receive love in order to return love. And that's what Jesus does in this moment. He receives the gift, and by receiving the gift, he honors the giver. And then he praises her before the disciples. He says, "Truly I tell you, wherever the good news, the gospel, is proclaimed in the world, what this woman has done will be told in remembrance of her." This is something worthy of praise and honor. Now, Jesus knows the disciples don't get it. Like, their hearts haven't yet learned to give and receive love freely. And so he uses this moment as an opportunity to teach the disciples. First thing he says to them, he says, "The poor you will always have with you, but you will not, and you can help them anytime you want, but you will not always have me." Now, Jesus isn't saying that the poor don't matter just because they're always here. He's not discounting it. Actually, what he's doing is he's quoting scripture, Deuteronomy chapter 15, which says there will always be poor people in the land, but comes with a commandment. "Therefore, I command you to be open-handed toward your fellow Israelites who are poor and needy in the land." So Jesus is reminding them of the commandment to be generous, but he's also telling them, you can't use the command to be generous to criticize someone else who is being generous. As one commentator put it, this woman's gift was neither the cause nor the cure for poverty in the land. It's an act of generosity. So Jesus is trying to teach them what it means to be generous. And what he is doing is he's making a contrast between the opportunity to serve the poor, which is always there every day, anytime you want, versus a limited time opportunity, which is to show your love and devotion and affection to me. Jesus goes on to say, she has done what she could. She has anointed my body beforehand for its burial. You see, despite Jesus' repeated warnings to the disciples, he's predicted his death so many times at this point in all of the Gospels. And yet the disciples still don't get it. They don't believe it. They don't understand that within a few days of this moment, their master and Lord is about to be arrested, crucified, killed, and buried. And what Jesus is saying to them is that this woman's gift anticipates the gift that I'm going to make for the world. Just as she washed Jesus' feet with her hair, Jesus will wash his disciples' feet in the upper room. Just as she broke open the alabaster jar, Jesus will allow his body to be broken on the cross. Just as the ointment was poured out freely, so Jesus' blood will be poured out as an offering of blessing and peace and reconciliation upon the earth. You see what I'm saying? This woman's gift participates in, mirrors the all-in kind of giving that Jesus is living and about to make for us. And for this reason, what she has done will be told wherever his good news and gospel is preached in the world. Because her gift is a prefiguration of the gift that Jesus will make on our behalf. I know Adam Grant says 70% of us are matchers, that that's the default orientation of our heart. But I think this is part of what the gospel does for us. Is it smashes forever. Forever. The possibility that we could ever match God's love for us, it can't be done. We can't match God's love. We can't earn God's love. The only thing we can do is receive it with humility and thanks. And in receiving it, allow it to transform our hearts, because I think this is God's intent. That we would no longer be matchers who are trying to match his love, but instead we would be givers whose hearts have been transformed, that we know how to freely receive and freely give love in his name. It's like the old hymn, and freely, 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 freely you have received, freely, freely give. Go in my name, and because you believe, others will know that I live. Freely, freely is how God desires us to both receive and give love to others. He wants us to be done forever with matching. One of my favorite lines from the story, and it only appears in John's gospel, is that when this woman breaks open the ointment and pours it on Jesus' feet, John writes, the whole house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. Like you couldn't get away with it, like it was just in your nostrils, right? A couple months, maybe 2 months ago, Jalen and I went to the store. We did some grocery shopping. And among the many things that we purchased was a half-gallon of milk. Put it in the trunk of the car, and sometime between grocery store and home, the half-gallon of milk spilled out, and there's a bunch of other junk in the back in the trunk, so it kind of rolled behind some of the other junk. We took all the groceries in, left the half-gallon of milk. I should add, this was around Memorial Day weekend when it was like, remember how hot it was for like a period of weeks? So it took me a few days to notice that anything was wrong in my car. First day, 2 or 3 days later, I started to smell something like, something's off, but I was too busy. I had a lot going on. I ignored the smell. I didn't have time to root through my car and find what was funky. The next day, there was no ignoring it. It was pungent, people. It was overwhelming. It wasn't just in the car, it just spending 30 seconds in the car. It was all over me. It stayed with you after you left. So I got in the trunk and I found it. And guys, this half gallon of milk, the fumes had expanded it out like it was like a balloon ready to pop, right? And I'm sure at some point, to relieve the pressure, the cap did relieve some of that pressure. And the reason I know that is because the water line, the liquid line for that milk was halfway, which meant that it had expanded it to its max, then milk got out and just was all over. You could touch the floorboard of the trunk. It was wet, saturated with spoiled milk. So I got home, I took all that junk out of my trunk. I took out, I was lucky, I had this spare tire that the panel was covering, so I took the whole panel out, threw it in the yard, sprayed it down. The problem was the milk had gotten past that panel and into the foam cushioning that surrounded the spare tire. I couldn't do anything about that, right? So what did I do? I went to the store and I got those Glade air fresheners, the kind that you stick in all your air conditioning vents. I had 2 of them. The package says one is good for 2 months. Well, I had 2 pointed directly at me whenever I was driving that car, because it was just brutal. For those of you who are Seinfeld fans, it was the beast. I could not get rid of it, could not exorcise the demons of this smell from my car. So I've been doing this for 2 months. And now if you get in my car, guess what it smells like? Overwhelming, overpowering perfume with a hint of spoiled milk still underneath, right? But it still stinks. So that's what my car is like. But I thought about that experience in relationship to what John is saying about smell, because I think he's telling the story of 2 smells back to back. Step back 15 verses from this moment where Mary pours out the ointment. 15 verses before is when Jesus gives the command to roll away the stone so that he can call forth Lazarus from the grave. And in that moment, Martha, Mary's sister, says, "No, Lord, there's a bad odor, for he's been dead for 4 days." Now, I have no idea what a body would smell like in that climate, in that heat, after 4 days in a tomb. But I am sure it would put to shame my spoiled milk car smell. It would have been overwhelming. And Jesus, of course, says, "Never mind," and he calls forth Lazarus. But I think John is tying together these two stories. He's tying together two smells. The smell of death, which is overpowering and overwhelming, and the smell of love, which fills the whole room. It fills our nostrils. And Jesus is, to some degree, or John, the gospel, is pointing out that what this woman does, her gift participates in the smell of love. It's not cheap Glade air freshener. Like it participates in the love that conquers death. What I'm getting at is this, is that our lives have an aroma. I'm not just talking about body odor. I'm talking about there's an aroma to the lives we lead. And a life of greed, man, it stinks. It's spoiled, it's curdled. Like no one wants to be around someone who's lived a life of greed. But a life of generosity, it has a sweet, fragrant aroma. It's the kind of aroma that you want to be around. And so Paul writes to the early church in Ephesus, and he says, be imitators of God as beloved children, and live in love as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. What Jesus did was fragrant. What the woman did for him was fragrant. Generosity is fragrant. It fills the air around us and it transforms the space between us. If you've ever experienced a beautiful, extravagant, over-the-top gift, you know those kinds of gifts change everything. So here's my charge to you. I want you to do a smelfie. You know what a smelfie is? Selfies when you take the phone and a smelfie is when you kind of sniff your armpit and see like what's going on down there, right? But I want you to take a smelfie of your life. In all honesty, what's the aroma of your life? Because what the story of Mary and the perfume, what inspires me to do is to check and say, is my life giving off that kind of aroma? Is it a life of graciousness, sweetness? Is my life a fragrant offering to God? We've spent this month talking about service and all the ways that you can serve. By supporting others, by promoting and sharing your glory with them, by being loyal as a caregiver to people in your life, by encouraging others. Today we talk about giving gifts, but all of it is about making our lives a fragrant offering to God, a sweet smelling offering before him. So here's the thing. We can't really get the aroma of our lives just on our own. Like, I don't think smelfies really work because we often are blind to our own smell. We need other people to smell us and check us out sometimes. We need community. If we're really going to practice this fragrant offering thing, it's not something we do individually, it's something we do together. Because in every single one of us, there is giver and taker and matcher. We're not just one thing. All of those inclinations are in all of us. And to me, that's good news because it tells me that I can grow as a giver. I can become more and more generous over time. I can grow in that practice. And one of the ways we grow in that practice is by noting among us who are the givers, who are the people whose lives give off a sweet aroma to God, and how can we learn from them, become more like them, whether it's Marlene and Jim, or whether it's Lydia Davis who was here last week, or any other, you probably have someone in your mind that you know gives off that kind of odor. You just want to be around them more. How can we be like those people? Because truly, we don't grow in generosity until we've learned to receive and had our lives touched by God's grace and the generosity of others first. So all month long, we've had this board out in the lobby. It's kind of moved around a little bit each week as we've had lemonade stands and other things going on. If you haven't seen it, it's right out there. You won't miss it as you walk out. And on it, we're challenging people to write down the name of someone who's been a supporter, an encourager, a caregiver, giver in your life. I encourage you to do that before you leave today. You can pin it to the board or you can take that with you, but it's a reminder, as others have done for you, go and do likewise. May we be people, a community of faith that has a pleasing aroma to our community around us, and most importantly, to God. And I want to say thank you as a pastor to this church, because I am amazed always by your capacity for generosity, that I could give a call out for shoes one week, having no idea how much we needed to raise, and to just receive in 1 week $9,000. Like, that is beautiful and amazing. And whether it's, shoes for the community day or Isaiah 117 house or Habitat or whatever, I always feel like we respond to the needs around us. And so I want to say thank you, because going back to around Memorial Day, Mother's Day, I believe, was when I made a call out that I wanted to take all of our Haitian students on the east side to the zoo with me. And I just said it's going to cost $20 a person, and before you knew it, we had $2,000 raised. And this past Saturday, not yesterday, but 8 days ago, we had the opportunity to take 45 Haitians who had never experienced anything like a zoo to the zoo for the very first time. And John Elgood went with me and took pictures and video. And I want to share this with you, this video, as a way of helping you to see, because I got to be there and experience it, but I wanted you to see the kind of impact, the fragrance that you're offering, that your gifts make in the world.
My name is Lavani, and thank you for the great day.
For the past 4 years, a group from our church has been traveling to the east side of Indianapolis every Sunday afternoon to lead English classes within the Haitian community. We have about 45 students, and one lesson this spring, we were talking about places in the city, vocabulary words like bank, restaurant, post office, and one of the words was zoo. We asked them, do you know what a zoo is? And they said, we know what it is, but we've never seen one before. And that planted the idea that at the end of the class this summer, we were going to take all of our Haitian friends to the zoo. So with the help of our church and the cooperation of the Indianapolis Zoo this past Saturday, we led about 40 Haitians from the east side into the zoo, and it was an amazing experience. Because, from the beginning, going in the entrance into the gardens, even before we got to the animals, they were all just so wide-eyed. Phones were out taking pictures. They'd never seen such a really beautiful place. And as we kept going, I remember the first animal we came to was the sea lions. And to see something that big moving so fast through the water, and it was like that all day long. Whatever we saw, whether it was lions or bears or giraffes or dolphins, they just couldn't take it all in. Many of the Haitians kept saying to me, première fois, which is first time to see anything like this. The zoo was amazing to work with. We let them know that we were coming, and they arranged these behind-the-scenes experiences. So that, special experiences where our friends got to reach out and touch an elephant, or go behind the scenes with the dolphin trainers and see how they teach the tricks that the dolphins do in the show. It was just amazing. Towards the end of the day, I caught a woman in our group. She was kind of off to the side and doing a little dance or jig to music in her own head. And she caught me looking at her, and she kind of smiled a little sheepishly, and then she explained. She said, "Kem content." My heart is happy. This is one of the best days of my life, she said. And I just feel so blessed and humbled that we were able, with the cooperation of so many, to be able to provide and share in that day with her.
Today is a beautiful day for us, because I see many animals. I don't know them, so it's a pleasure for me.
Thank you for today. It's a pleasure for me, or for us, for everyone today. It's a very good day.
Good morning. My name is Dawn McKnight, and I am the office manager here at Zionsville UMC. thank you for joining us today. We would love to get to know you more and spend some time with you. If you'd like to know more about our faith community, please visit our church website at zumc.org. There, you'll find the many ministry opportunities we have to offer. If you need to contact one of our staff members, all of our contact information is at the bottom of each webpage. You can also connect with us via social media throughout your week for daily inspiration and community. You'll find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube under the username Zionsville UMC. Once again, thank you for joining us this morning, and we hope you have a wonderful week.